Hello, welcome back to Math Time with Professor Prime, and I'm your host as always, Professor Prime. And today we're going to talk about math and Yu-Gi-Oh! Dark Duel Stories, a fairly fun game that had really awesome music that definitely elevated it. And so, yeah, I'm going to have some fun. I hope you do too. So this is how this video is going to go. I'm going to talk about math and how it's used in Yu-Gi-Oh! Dark Duel Stories. How is it used in its gameplay and its story, if you could say it has a story. But we'll get to that. And we're going to talk about some other features of the game and how math is used in those features. We're going to talk about how math is used like in the meta sense. And there's a lot of things that we could talk about throughout this video. There's just like a lot that you could actually say about this game and math that's being used in it. It's actually really crazy. Um, so yeah, we're gonna get into it, and honestly, the story doesn't really exist in this game, but spoilers ahead, I guess. But I mean, I'm probably gonna really stick away from it because there's really, again, not much. You're pretty much dueling people and advancing, and that's pretty much it. For the story, there's a lot going on gameplay wise though. So let's get into it. And again, spoilers ahead if you're concerned, but you should be good. So before we get too far into it, I'd like to also say, like, seriously, the music. Like, I started off with like saying something about the music, and it's just like it's really awesome. And there's something about games that came out at that time on Game Boy Color that just had bangers on them. It's wild to me. I don't know why it happened, but I'm glad it did. But let's talk about the gameplay and go from there. So to start, um, let's talk about just having a deck. The idea with the game is at any given battle that you'll have, you have to have a deck that it is like exactly 40 cards. When you start the game, as a result, you start with a deck that's 40 cards, and as you go on throughout the game, you'll build up your stats, you'll encounter opponents, and you'll be able to increase the pool of cards that you can pull from, so you can build different decks that work for you, and that's pretty cool. And there are 800 different cards that you could get in this game, which is insane. So with that in mind, there are some more things that like kind of like limit your deck, and here they are. So one of the things is your duelist level, and there are ways that they calculate that I'm not going to go too far into. Just know that there's a lot of math in that, um, you know, and the duelist level, uh, it restricts certain cards from being used. Like because you have to have something that like you have to have a card that has like a card cost that's lower or equal to the duelist level. And then for the deck as a whole, you can't have a deck that has a card cost that exceeds your deck value. And there is a bunch of math that determines that as well, but just like the duelist level, it can increase. Um, and just to make sure that made sense, the idea is like so you have each of your individual cards and you take their sum, and that'll give you the card cost for the entire deck, and it can exceed your deck value. But I don't want to focus too much on that. So anyway, that's the deck stuff, right? So how about battles? So here's how the game handles it. The way it starts off is like each opponent has 8,000 life points. And the idea is if you're going to win the battle, then you have to get your opponent's life points to zero, or they could run out of cards before you do, or you could draw all five cards that will allow you to form Exodia, which will mean an automatic win. So those are the three ways of winning. And then as far as the gameplay is concerned, like the whole back and forth, I'll try not to get too heavy involved with it, but give you all like the gist of what's going on, just to say, hey, there's a lot of math in here. So you have your monster cards, you have your magic cards, you have your ritual cards, and your trap cards. Um, you can place one monster card each turn. You can place one trap card face down each turn, and you can play multiple ritual cards and multiple magic cards. And you have to be careful though and make sure that the effects of everything is worth it, because if you lose all of your cards and you're not able to draw any, and your opponent still is, you will lose, even if you had more life points. That's key, right? So you have to be strategic about which cards you're using and when. And then there's this idea that there are monsters that have certain levels. So you might have like level 1 to 4, and those monsters wouldn't require a sacrifice. But then you might have the next step up where it's like you have 5 to 6, and they would require you to sacrifice one monster, and then you have like a level 7 to 8, and that will require you to sacrifice two monsters. And if you play like a ritual card, that actually requires you to sacrifice three. So you have to be strategic because you're losing cards in the process, and you want to make sure whatever you're summoning is something that's going to be powerful. And one of the other elements when you're fighting in this particular game is that like so you can only place one monster per turn, right? But what you could do is if you had another monster card in your hand, you could place it over top of it. And the idea is that wait, am I saying that right? Okay, back it up for a second. So you can play one monster per turn, and there are 5 slots on your side, 5 slots on your opponent's side, at any given point, right? So if you're out of slots, but you place a monster on top of another monster, it will replace it if it's not a fusion. Because there are some cards that will cause a fusion to happen. So if you have two cards that are valid, they'll actually fuse together and replace the monster that you have. You can also fuse monsters that are actually in your hand, but the problem with that, if they're in your hand, you'll have to do like most likely sacrifices. So you have to be careful. You have to be strategic with that. And then the idea is like, you know, each of the monster cards have attacks. Sorry, they have attack points and they have defense points. And you're kind of playing a tug of war where if you're careful, right, you can decimate your opponents and destroy their monsters and attack their life points, preferably directly. But if you're not careful, like let's say if you're in attack but they have like better defense than you, then you're going to end up losing some life points if you're not careful. So you have to like have a lot of things that you're managing, and you might not write everything down, but you're doing the math. The math's being done behind the scenes, both from the game and for you, or from you. So it's like interesting, and the way these things go is they're usually pretty fast paced. Like even though it's turn based, like you kind of have a good idea of what you want to do if you've been playing long enough. And so yeah, that's like the basics of the gameplay in terms of battle. But there's more to it than that. So the idea with the story, if you could really call it that, because again, it's not really there. It's more of just like a campaign mode where you're fighting different duelists. The idea is like you have 16 main duelists that you have to fight, but there's 5 bonus ones that you can, for a total of 25 duelists in that the campaign mode that you can fight. And the idea is like as you're progressing, there are different tiers to advance to the next stage of duelists, like you know that next level. So let's say if you're at tier 1, there you had like 5 opponents in there, and you have to beat those opponents to get to the next tier where I think there's like 6 fighters. But either way, I just wanted to throw some numbers out there to give you some context. But here's the kicker: you have to beat your opponent 5 times each, as far as all those scenarios are concerned, to progress. But the cool part is, right, you're building up points, you're getting cards from them each time you win. And you can go back and fight them later on after you beat them. So there's ways to beef up everything. You can beef up your duelist level, you can beef up your deck volume, and you can beef up the amount of cards that you have. And throughout the game, like you can also get card parts where you have like an upper part and a lower part, and there's a crazy amount of math that's actually in it. But when you look at like the 280 construction parts that you have, because of how they're divided and because of certain cards having to come together in order to make something that's valid, there ends up being a lot of different combos that you can do if you're careful, if you're thinking about them. You just have to keep the restrictions in mind. Like there's a total of 9,800 construction part combos. It's wild. And there's like a lot of stuff that had to be left out because they weren't valid. But even with that, it's still like that's almost 10,000 different possibilities. That's insane. With that in mind, there's also a versus mode and a trade mode, and you can connect with people via link cable, and handle things there. And there's also a password mode, and the password mode allows you to do a couple of things within the game to unlock certain situations or get certain effects, but it also allows you to get certain cards. But what they did at the time is, they had things working together. So the idea was like, hey, if you had certain cards in real life, then you can use them to input passwords into the game and then get those cards in the game. And at least over here in the States, you had three cards that came with the game. So you can like input those, and that was like cool. But like I didn't like the practice overall though. Like going out there and having to get those specific cards. Like I collected them anyway, but so I didn't need the extra push. But you know, there is a way to circumvent that though. The internet had come a long way by that point. And I know for cards that I didn't have, I absolutely looked that up because like why take that random chance? Like, you know? And then I guess like with some people, they could also have used a Game Shark or an Action Replay. Man, I remember those. Like, so so there are ways around that, and you didn't have to go out there and like hunt down a bunch of cards like they wanted you to. Um, because the idea is like you get random packs, so it's like, oh well, I didn't get this one card that could maybe unlock something in the game, so I'll keep on like buying packs to get these cards that may or may not have the password. And it's like screw that. Because it's like if you like to collect them cards like I did, fine, but you're not gonna like buy extra just to support that, or ideally you wouldn't. But at least that's my opinion on it, though. In any case, there was a lot that went into that game, and so now that I've talked a lot about that, I wanted to kind of like also talk about like a lot of the meta stuff that went into it. So it's like Yu-Gi-Oh was really popular back then, and I think it's actually still going on now, but it was really popular back in the early 2000s, especially when it came our way. Even though we got like the four kids dub, which was pretty sanitized, but still it was fun for a lot of people. It got me into it. And I definitely collected the cards, and like I was just saying, like they had some angles that they were trying to like have both the video game and the cards push each other, and I get that from a marketing standpoint. But there's a lot of math that goes into that, and there was a lot of money to be made off of these games. And what's interesting is like Yu-Gi-Oh! Dark Duel Stories was the first Yu-Gi-Oh! Game to like be sold outside of Japan, beating Forbidden Memories by just like a few days, but still it counts. And what's fascinating is that wasn't the first one, or it wasn't the only one. Like it wasn't an isolated game. It was actually a sequel to two other games, and it had a sequel that followed it, which is just insane to me. But like we had weird distribution stuff going on back then. But anyway, there's a lot of math that goes into why someone would make this game, and it amounts to money, right? And then there's a lot of math that goes into actually making the game, right? There's math in the animations. There's math and how you actually play, like right, that gets all set up. There's a lot of math and the computer science that it takes and the programming that happens. And they use a lot of math to make a lot of rules. And you could also keep track of your stats in the game, and that was cool. But my point is, they definitely use a lot of math in this game, which is surprising. Like, not surprising that there was some math because I expected that. That's the whole point why I did this. But it was just like it went deep, like it went crazy deep, like formulas upon formulas. Like it's wild. But yeah, so on this little game, like that came out early 2000s on the Game Boy Color, it was chock full of math, and that's pretty cool to me. And I had fun playing it growing up. Because, you know, like I was into, you know, Yu Gi Oh! At the time. You know, I watched the show. I played the card game like physically, and so I wanted to do the same digitally, and it was pretty fun. And they had, you know, clear cut rules in the game, and you know all these cool stuff that you can do when you're in person. Some of the things that are going on in the game, you know, you don't really see. And even though in the video game, you still are just like seeing cards go back and forth. Stuff like fusion, that's cool to see because you know you placing this card on top of another one, and bam, two cards become one, and you get this new one. And it's a little bit more cool to see that in a video game than you know imagining this or that in reality. In any case, it was a fun experience for me growing up, and I really, really, really enjoyed the music. I can't stress that enough. And there's a lot of math that goes into the music. Because like the way it's designed is like, yeah, you have tracks and they're like they're different lengths. All right, so there's math and how long the music is, or how long the track is. And then with those tracks, you know, it's like once it's done, it would repeat. So there's math in that whole repetition. There's math in that loop. And I feel like it helps when you're playing because, you know, you might be playing an opponent and it's just like, okay, the music's going on and it's chill. But like if it's a boss, it's like, okay, and you're feeling amped up and it might make you feel like you're more sharpened. There might be more of a flow to it and you're like, okay, yeah, I got this. And you know there's math and a flow. Oh, you know. So anyway, yeah, I really dug the music, and I still dig it now. I still listen to tracks here and there, and everything had to come together to make this game work. You had the gameplay, you had the rules going on behind the scenes, the gameplay. You know, the ones that are up front too. You had math in the music. You had math in how this game was made, how it was produced, how it was marketed, why it exists in the first place. And I think that's cool. Math is everywhere and in everything. And when I think about math and how we learn it in school, it's really just a representation of things that are out there, but we don't teach that context. And so a lot of people are just like, oh, you know, I'm not going to use math outside of school. It's like, no, you use math all the time. Math is universal. It's happening whether we call it math or not. It's happening all the time. You're doing math right now, and I'm doing math right now. If you're watching this on your phone, there's math in that. You're watching this on your larger computer. There's math in that. There's math everywhere. And that's what I want to get across to people. So I enjoy doing this series for that very reason. And it's progressed where I've gotten to talk about, you know, my feelings about this or that when I do it, and that's been enriching for me. Because when I started, it's like I would say things here and there about my feelings about this and that, but I've gotten to go in depth. And the nature of my Math in the World series, which this is a part of, has changed, and for the better. I liked it before, and I liked it. I mean, I'm sorry, I like it even better now. But in any case, I feel like this video has been long enough. But I hope you have enjoyed it. I know I have, and I will see you in the next one. Professor Prime out.